Okay, we're going to have a question and answer period now, so I could ask you, stand up and say your name and ask a question.
So the laws are, all of the laws that I talked about are written in a neutral way. It won't, in the text of the law, it won't say if you say something about Islam, but in the application, that's what winds up happening for various reasons. So it's not written, it's written in a neutral way, but its application winds up applying to Islam.
It's only applied in their case, but it's not applied in everybody else.
Right.
Oh, thank you.
Well, I guess in France, if you make anti-Semitic comments, it's a problem too. Yeah.
Victor.
Victor Roslow, I do filming for a lot of these kinds of events. Could you tell me, please, to what extent do you think that in Western democratic countries, the notion that truth must be an absolute defense is the basis of the legal system, the machinery of state, and the day-to-day workings of everything we do? To what extent would you say that that concept, that freedom, that a thing being true must be an absolute defense against any state process against you? I mean, if that relates deeply to the legal systems and to the way state apparatus works, do you not think this is problematic, that we have to redefine what these states are?
It's not. It still applies in America, but the rest of Europe, it's gone. It's gone. I mean, even the regular defamation laws are different. Like the defamation laws in the UK, for example, are like if you ruin someone's reputation, the kinds of defenses they have are it caused them to have a lower opinion. Truth isn't a defense in there, and I think you can see from what I was talking about, it's actually just the opposite. It's designed to conceal the truth. You can't say the truth anymore because you could offend somebody. So truth is no longer, I don't know if it ever was here, but it's not now.
Could you still call those democracies then? And if not, what would you call a state like that?
I'll leave that up to you. I mean, all I can tell you is that, the reason, a lot of times when people hear me speak or they're first learning about this issue, even though they might find it interesting, they kind of minimize it because they think, oh, it's just a free speech issue and there are more important things. And I'm trying to explain to people that free speech is the foundation of a democracy. Without free speech, everything else will eventually go. You won't have a free press. You won't be able to have political dissonance. You will not be able to speak the truth, and you can't do it now. And even in America, as I said, even though we have laws that say it's okay, the administration that we have now is working with the OIC to have, outreach programs and, euphemistic summits and all kinds of things denying what's really going on. And if you know anything about national security, it is a very bad strategy to just focus on the behavior and ignore the motivation, the goals, the ideology. You cannot come up with a successful strategy to catch people in the early stages if you want to pretend that everybody's doing it equally and that there isn't a network, that there isn't a common thread, that there isn't a common ideology. It's just like a gang down the block. If you want to do that, it's not just about free speech. It's hampering national security. I mean, I was told I have 45 minutes or an hour, and I spoke about what I was, asked to speak about. But I give seminars that are longer and more focused, and it's really about how people don't realize, over the years I've really learned how critical free speech is to everything. I mean, free speech is critical to religious freedom. I'm not very religious, and I gather a lot of Canadians aren't, but for people who are religious, I mean, what good is it if you can have your own religion in your head, but you can't say it out loud, if you can't meet in a congregation, if you can't pray with other people? It sounds like they're just trying to shut you up, but what they're really doing is it's a thought-stopping measure. They're trying to delete the words so that they can delete the thoughts. If they say, if you can't talk about Islamic terrorism, does that mean it doesn't exist? No, all it means is you're going to have a much harder time countering it and doing something about it because you're going to ignore all the warning signs that they're giving you. And what about human rights violations? I mean, little girls are forced to get married when they're 9, 10, 12. It's basically, I call it forced marriage, but let's face it, it's rape. It's repeated rape, and you can't talk about it in the UN Human Rights Council because, you know, Muhammad married someone who was not, you know, so it's okay. And if he did it, it's okay. And therefore, if you talk about the plight of these suffering children, then you're defaming Islam. And that's what's more important. So truth, no. And it's not just about free speech. It's really about everything that we either do or should hold dear in the West. Freedom of religion, human rights, and our own protection. And we have the right, by the way, to protect ourselves. We have the right and the obligation to do that. Yes. Yeah.
I am an Iranian, I was an Iranian, and I lived through that. You see, what hurts me is that in Iran, no minority has any right. Whether you're a woman or minority religion, Christian, Baha'i, they kill them. They
Right.
kill Baha'is.
Right.
The problem is that they have the control over everybody. They have their form of freedom to tell everybody how to think. And now they're exporting that to
Right.
here
Right.
to control over us.
Right.
And we are too coward, or we want to be too politically correct.
Right.
And that's why it's gotten as far as it's gotten.
Right.
And that's a problem.
Right, thank you for pointing that out. You know, we can't, I get questions often, like how can we change other people? How can we change Muslims? How can, you know, if you've ever been in a relationship, you probably figured out you can't really change someone else. But how about this thought? Don't let them change us. Why don't you just keep who you are and not let them change us?
Yeah, it's simple.
Oh, I just already called on her. I'm sorry, I didn't realize you were doing it. I apologize.
I'm interested in what's happening in the United States with people like Trump and everything. What do you think on the Republican side, people who are naming Islam? So I just want your thoughts on it.
Ben Carson.
Well, I mean, I'm not, you know, I'm not gonna,
No, because you've been mentioning Obama, very rightly.
I'm talking about their positions on this issue, and, you know, all I can tell you is in America, there's a lot of people who are, you know, it's different reasons. Part of it could be they're actually afraid. Some people are actually afraid to speak up. Some people are just too politically correct. But I also think there's a lot of ignorance. And unfortunately, you know, you go to a school like Georgetown, where they have the Center for Muslim-Christian Understanding, funded by Prince Talal of Saudi Arabia, coming in telling students whose parents are paying a pretty penny for a, quote, prestigious university, who are, I go over there periodically, and they're just being fed a whole bunch of, you know, crap about how we're bigots, we're prejudiced, and they have charts, how many times they said something, it's based on all kinds of false assumptions. How many times they said something negative about Muslims in the media versus how many times they said it against Jews. I mean, the truth makes no difference. I mean, if Muslims committed a terrorist attack and the Jews didn't, oh, it has to be mentioned equally in the media. I mean, that's the kind of stuff that they're pumping it out, they're pumping it out, they're pumping it out. And I think that there are not a lot of people who have the time or interest to research it on their own. And unfortunately, the way the schools are these days, students don't have the critical thinking skills they used to. They just say, oh, okay, and they don't ask questions, they don't ask the right questions, they just swallow all of it. And, you know, the groups that are doing this have the right idea in terms of, I mean, harmful. They're targeting the youth. So they are purposely, you know, going to grow up not knowing what's going on. The kinds of seminars and things that they're saying, in, for example, the interfaith dialogue, which is really nothing more than disinformation campaigns, is, I totally lost what my train of thought was. What was it? Well, the point is that you have Prince Talal of Saudi Arabia funding it here. Why is he funding it here instead of Saudi Arabia? He could never get away with it there. Saudi Arabia, you can't be a citizen unless you're Muslim. So he's going to come here and tell us we should be more tolerant? Really?
Could you help me understand what's in it for Obama to work so intimately with the OIC to place Muslim Brotherhood members in every security agency?
You know, I have to tell you, when I first started doing this work, which was before Obama, I really tried to present things in a nonpartisan way. And when Obama was elected initially, because I follow this issue. I mean, you're just hearing a little part of it, but I follow what CARE's doing. I follow what the OIC's doing. I follow how the policies are, what they're doing is affecting U.S. policy or or practices. And in the beginning, I thought, well, maybe he doesn't know, or maybe this, or maybe that. I really did. I'm telling you the truth. I really tried to give him every benefit of the doubt. But it is such a pattern, and it goes so deep. At a certain point, no. There's no way that he can't know. And if he doesn't, then I don't know which is worse. I don't have ESP to say what someone's intent is. All I can tell you is it's an absolute pattern in all of national security and how he deals with foreign countries. He has strong ties to some of the Muslim Brotherhood front groups, and he's obviously sympathetic for one reason or another.
Penny?
I have a two-part question. Number one, my husband read 3 different Qurans numerous times, and it is very, very obvious that it is a violent religion. How can they say they are the religion of peace? Okay? I mean, it's written there. It's what they believe in. So how can you contradict what is written?
Well, the way they do it is they, as you know, there was the, 2 periods, and the first period was peaceful and the second period was violent. So what they do is they pick and choose, they cherry pick which sentences they're going to cite. But that's what a disinformation campaign is. Most of the time, there's different kinds of Muslims that'll say these things. I think there are, in the West, a lot of people who identify themselves as Muslim but are actually ignorant of their own religion, haven't even read the Quran. I really do think that. I also think there are other people who identify themselves as Muslim who were raised, if they were raised somewhere in the Middle East, where that's their identity. Like in America, we don't tend to identify that way. It doesn't matter if you're black, white, male, female, Jewish, Christian, you're American. But when you go into those other countries, people identify by their religion, by their ethnicity, by their tribe, whatever it is, and they're raised a certain way, and I really think they're just in denial. They're in denial because it's probably very hard to cope with that this is how you were raised, So, but it's a disinformation campaign, and that's why I'm trying to explain that it's not just a religion. I think part of the reason we don't want to touch it is America really does have religious freedom, and we don't want to tell someone they shouldn't have their religion. But I think it's really important to understand that at a certain point, it's not religion anymore, it's politics. If they want to pray 5 times a day or wear a hijab or anything like that, at least in our country, I know some European countries are starting to outlaw these things, but they're allowed to do that, and not a lot of people care. No one's trying to outlaw that. The way you can tell it's political and not religious is who are the religious dictates for? The people who follow the religion. Who's supposed to follow Judaism? Jews. Who's supposed to follow Christianity? Christians. Who's supposed to follow Sharia law? Everybody in the world? Come on, that's not a religion. When you have that, that's politics. A lot of it is telling other people how to make other people, and do it by law, not even evangelizing, to have it legally implemented. That is political, and I think until we acknowledge that and treat it accordingly, it'll be a big problem. These disinformation campaigns are not really different. I don't know a lot about the whole communist thing. This is my area, but that's what disinformation campaigns are. When they're talking to an audience that doesn't know a lot, and they come on and they have a really nice personality, and they're like, poor us, they're treating us just like they treated the Catholics when they got off the boat, and isn't that terrible? We should all hold hands and sing Kumbaya. They're doing it for a reason. If you can't acknowledge Islamic terrorism, Islamic persecution, if you can't acknowledge that, then while you're standing there holding hands, behind the scenes, they can do whatever they want, and you can't acknowledge it, you can't know it. It creates a safe space for them to further their goals. That's what disinformation campaigns are.
My other part of the question,
Oh, that's
if I may, is you say that we have to speak up and whatever protest or whatever. We're talking about here in Canada. In the States, maybe you're more protected. If we are not protected, then we can be jailed and fined. how do we go about, I mean, most people can't afford to go to jail or to pay Brigitte Bardot 15.
Well, first of all, I didn't actually say like protest or rally or whatever word you use. One thing you can do is, what I said is to hold your leaders accountable, and that's something that you can do. It's up to you who you vote into office. It's up to you which church you go to. And I'll tell you what, if you have a church that's doing these interfaith seminars and you speak to your pastor and they don't stop it. Huh?
We tried here in Canada to vote for the right.
Well, I mean, that's really, you have to try to, like, Bill 59 isn't passed yet. I think it's really important to raise awareness. When we were at the hotel and Valerie mentioned to somebody working there, oh, she's going to talk about Bill 59, they just kind of looked like, huh, what are you talking about? I mean, people don't even know anything about it. So it's really important. If you can only do one thing a week, forward an article, have a conversation with a friend, it would be like a ripple effect. You tell 5 people and they tell 5 people and they tell 5 people. You have to start somewhere. But I think it starts with education and educating people you know.
How many people in this room, for example, sent out their letter today to Trudeau? And, okay? But I sent it this morning, urgent request, because that's the thing that you have to understand. I don't actually think the petitions do a whole lot of good. I think you can go with 500,000 signatures and they don't care. But you have to bombard them with emails and with phone calls. That's the other thing. You phone and you phone and you phone and you phone and you drive them insane. Then they know that you really...
Can I just add something to that? Because I've been involved for various causes. Like, emails are very easy to delete. You can send lots of emails and they will just keep pressing it. It's actually more bothersome to receive the fax.
Oh, that's interesting.
On their side.
Oh, that's interesting.
Well, I'll tell you, having worked
the fax machine anymore?
I'll tell you, having worked,
Okay, just-
for a second. Having worked in Congress, I will tell you that the more effort a particular act takes on your part, the more weight they give it on the other side. So phone calls don't get as much weight, the emails get a little bit more weight, letters get a lot more weight.
You mean snail mail?
Yeah.
Pardon?
Real mail?
Real mail, snail mail, yes.
Speaking
Yeah,
of
go
Bill 59, yesterday or the day before, I read that Angela Merkel's government was cracking down on Facebook and social media criticism of the refugee, or invaders we should call them, but anyway, that they arrested 60 people and that these were far-right groups or whatever. And I'm always suspicious, are these far-right groups or are they just groups, like Pegida is called a
They're
far-right
us.
group and they are.
They're us.
They're us.
I mean,
people that care.
So they're just, so this was just.
I don't know, what do you mean by a far-right group? I mean, Georgetown, when I go there, they're always, they can't have a single seminar where they don't slam like Republicans and
Yeah.
conservatives. I'm like, why are they even talking about that? See, because that's who's evil. It's the conservatives, it's not, Islamic terrorists.
Yes, so my question was, do we actually know who these people are? Do you have any?
I'm not as focused on Europe, to tell you the truth. I know Geert Wilders, and I know how he's characterized, and I know I don't agree with it at all. I think he's a freedom lover.
Well, and I've seen Pegida things, and they have a big banner, and they say, non-violence and blah, blah, blah. And
We love our country.
No, it's just somehow being Tea Party,
Yeah.
Republican, conservative, or right-wing is all of a sudden the evil thing. If you read the OIC's Islamophobia bulletins, they have that targeted a lot. And then they try to form coalitions with progressives and liberals who'll have that, people who will buy their agenda and where they can claim victimhood together. They're going to all join with the We Can't Breathe crowd, and like it's the same thing.
it sounded to me like it was a huge human rights violation. 60 people were arrested, their computers and cell phones were confiscated, and stuff like this is like, what is going on? And that's scary.
Well, up is down and down is up.
Yeah.
So I was wondering, is there any coalition that's starting to form in the U.S. or across North America more on the right side to combat these blasphemy laws? Like, is there
I mean, there's a tiny one that we have, I guess, right? What do you think, Valerie? We're sprinkled. There's, it's small, but we're doing the best we can.
I mean, I have no idea how to, get people so aroused to actually do something. I mean, it's very, very frustrating. You can try and educate them and you can ask them to, write the letters or whatever. I don't know if it's gonna take, getting 100,000 people marching on Parliament Hill. But nobody's gonna do it. I mean, this is the frustration.
250,000 Syrians to show up within, no, I'm not kidding, within a year, where there's going to be a logistic nightmare. There will be huge issues.
It's going to be a social nightmare.
And exactly, and that's going to push, it's almost like everything has to really go down to the bottom before you can recoup. But I did have one question, I guess it's, oh, sorry, my name is Christina. My name is Christina. Going to a lot of the points you mentioned, you discussed defining and how one, for example, Islam sees the West.
Right.
And, I've been raised to believe in a Lord Savior, Jesus Christ. I'm a Christian. I'm not church going. However, at the same time, historically, my background is I'm Spanish from Spain, and in our schools and in my own home and in my own country, we discuss the wars. We go as far back as the empires, and what is classical European history. We teach that, and we have a sense in Europe of, yes, the Crusades were violent, but they were a drop in the bucket because they were a response.
They were a response.
They were a
right.
tiny response to, and then everyone says, well, the Spaniards were horrible because of the Inquisitions, and look what they did to the Jews. And well, there was a reaction there.
Right,
it's all
right.
reactionary, right?
Right.
And they use all this historical shame and blame, and they dumb down our kids. They dumb down a lot of.
It's worse than that. They're not dumbing them down. They're lying. Now they've got to just lying.
Okay, and they're right. So now they're lying,
Yeah.
and they have power. Where do they have power? OIC and CARE. There's all this money. So much money, so much power, so much place in the world, be it government, what have you, elected representatives,
But I just want to say they have it because we gave it to them.
Yes, okay, but they have that, right? They come in, so you've got the dumbing down, you've got all this money, and they make it impossible for someone, for example, to own a business because, or I shouldn't say own a business, I should say, have a product or be in business, for example, and they have all this power.
Right.
So if you ask me, how do you solve a problem? Well, you identify the problem. What's wrong with, what are the aspects, what's wrong? Well, there's a problem with CARE.
Right.
And there's a problem with OIC. So
There's a problem with us.
No, but you've got to bring them down. Yes, there is. I'm not denying that. I'm not saying, yes, people have all this, I don't know, these guilt issues or these shame issues, which I certainly don't understand, but whatever. The point is, so you bring down the OIC, you bring down CARE. How do you do that? Should that not really be the focus? Ultimately, because if they had that power over Nike, and if they had that power over Hollywood...
Yeah, you know what, to be honest with you, I can understand the companies that capitulated because they're not there to make some political statement. They're there to make a profit. And if they're threatened in a way that's going to shut them down, it's a business decision. So the decision making has to be by the public to make sure that groups like CARE don't have the prestige and power they have to begin with. I understand what you're saying. The problem is the OIC and CARE. You're not going to change the OIC and CARE.
I don't want to. I want to work. I want to do what they do, but with the inverse. I want to copy their methodology and their way of doing it.
Every time.
And that's the way we need to go because they're obviously very successful.
Well, if they're focusing on the students, then you should focus on the students. If they're running for school, run for your school board. If they don't that is what you should do. But the focus has to be on yourself. Run for the school boards. What are you letting into your churches? What are you letting into your schools? What are you letting into? And it's not going to be some easy solution that I can give you because as you pointed out, they have money and power and we have a lot of work to do because everyone's busy.
Well, I believe that in my religion, right, my Pope and my church has a lot of freaking money. A lot of money and a lot of power. What is wrong there? What is wrong with my organized religion?
You have to start by, especially in a religion, by not being afraid to say that your values are superior. the multiculturalism practice isn't working. I'm sorry to use that language, but it's just, yeah.
I'm just saying that the money, there is.
But it's not the money that's doing it if it wasn't fueled by people who were willing to relinquish their values. It starts with values. It starts with values and education. And that's what I meant when I said we have a lot of work to do. When you have the values and the education, then you'll use your money properly.
There are a certain number of
I'll say your name.
there are a certain number of Muslims who don't agree with CARE, do not agree with the Muslim Brotherhood, are very aware of what they stand for, are very upset that these people are getting influence in high places whereby their voices remain muted. Are you working at all with people like that?
Me personally?
Or perhaps there has to be some kind of an alliance.
Well, there are some, I have to tell you, there's a few people, places who've tried to do it and are continuing to try to. It hasn't really produced a lot of results. There are 1 or 2 Muslims who are out there on their own trying to fight this and who are very vocal, and that's nice. But I'm not sure that's really a viable, great strategy. I mean, I'm just going by the results. Sorry. Yeah.
On the subject of companies,
I cannot hear you.
On the subject of companies, I can't think of one single company that's ever been bankrupted or financially ruined by an Arab boycott. I mean, there was for decades a boycott against Israel, and any company that ever did business with Israel, and many of them were frightened or terrorized into not doing business with the state of Israel. But there were 2 main ones that just ignored the boycott completely. That was Coca-Cola and Subaru, and they've done pretty well. I mean, there was
I didn't say that the companies were destroyed. As you heard, they capitulated, and maybe that's why they weren't destroyed. Either way, the point to me is that they capitulated. Why can't Nike have a sneaker that has Air with the logo they want when it says Air? Didn't even say a lot. I mean, maybe, honestly, arguably, I think they should be able to say a lot too, but it didn't. It said Air. Why shouldn't they be able to do that without being threatened? The pressure was pretty bad if you research that case. It wasn't just a passing thing. But then there are other companies that capitulate more easily. I guess they don't want the bad press that's going to go out from these groups saying what bigots there are,
If you don't mind, I really urgently like to just quickly respond.
Yeah,
The issue isn't fear of boycott. The issue is fear of death. The South Park, they produced. Now the people you referred earlier to, the people who made the play about the Mormons.
Right.
That's the people who wrote it and produced
the same ones that did the South Park. I know that.
The makers of South Park.
And they edited the cartoons on TV.
Yes.
With Muhammad.
Yes, they did 3 magnificent things with Mohammed, which were censored by the networks. But they themselves made fantastic. Their band, all 3 episodes of South Park involving Mohammed are banned. You can download them from the Pirate Bay, and I recommend that you do, but they're banned. Now, shortly after they aired one of them, a car full of explosives was found outside their office in Times Square. That's why they capitulate. It isn't a boycott they're worried about.
Well, it could be different reasons for different groups. It's not always the same reason. People have different reasons. I mean, sometimes CARE files a lawsuit, and maybe, I have a friend who had 7 organizations file lawsuits against him for $1 each, saying that they defamed. It was Muslim organizations. He never even mentioned them. He was talking about a different organization, and these 7 other organizations said, well, if you're saying it about them, then you must mean us. Well, don't you think most people would just be like, I'll pay the $7 to make them go away? But he didn't want to do that. He wanted to clear his name. Well, it went on and on and on, and $100,000 later, he won his case and his name was cleared. But a lot of people don't have the money, the time. So lawsuits like that are to bleed you dry. They're to wear you out. As Ezra Levant says, the process is the punishment. So there's a myriad of reasons people capitulate. Sometimes it's financial motivation. Sometimes it's just the emotional stress of the time. Sometimes it's actual death threats or inferences of it.
Rena?
Yeah, my name's Rena. Could you tell me a little bit about Hillary Clinton's compliance or bringing these I don't know, bills to the UN or approving that?
Yeah, Hillary Clinton had, well, originally the Organization of Islamic Cooperation was passing, they were called defamation of religions resolutions. And first of all, the way they interpreted it, it didn't apply to the other religions, it only applied to Islam. And second of all, their definition of defamation is very, very different than we have in America. In America, the definition of defamation has to be a false statement. Truth is a defense. It has to be a statement of fact, not an opinion. So if you say something bad about somebody, no matter how terrible it is, if it's a true statement or an opinion, it's completely constitutionally protected. That is not the OIC's definition of defamation. In our country, you can only defame people, but you're allowed to talk about ideas, religions, policies, politics, anything you want. You can say whatever you want. But the OIC's definition of the concept of defaming a religion, a religion is an idea. Can an idea be insulted? Can an idea be offended or defamed? And if it's defamed, should it be illegal? Should you be fined? Should you be punished? Should you be jailed? Should you be flogged? So we were passing those,
Beheaded?
Yeah, we were passing those resolutions year after year after year. And see, this is the thing. Those resolutions are really blasphemy laws. Now, the punishment might be different. They know that in the West, you're not going to get beheaded or flogged, but it's still going to have the same language that's prohibited. So it's basically blasphemy laws. They're not going to come to the West or even to the UN and say, let's pass worldwide, well, now they are saying it, they're getting bolder and bolder, yeah. But they, originally they weren't going to come and say, let's have worldwide blasphemy laws or let's have blasphemy laws in America and Canada, because everybody would laugh at them and say, what are you talking about? So what they did is they found language that sounds more palatable to us in the West. Defamation. Well, we already have defamation laws. Well, sure, why not? Let's do that. Let's all be nice to each other and not defame anybody. And it took the West years and years to start to catch on and realize, hey, wait a minute. We're defining that word a little bit differently and it has dire consequences potentially. So we don't want to do that anymore. So Hillary Clinton went to the OIC in 2011 and said, can you write another resolution that would address your concerns about Islamophobia and still allow us to retain free expression? That was Resolution 1618. And even though I personally think there are still numerous problems in the resolution, the resolution dropped the word defamation and said to combat intolerance based on religion or belief. And it was to prevent, the language sounded like it was to prevent violence and discrimination against religious minorities. So we thought, wow, well, this is great, because wouldn't we want to protect all religious minorities from violence and discrimination? It only had one clause in it that used the word criminalization, and it was to criminalize the imminent incitement of violence. So we signed it onto it because we have laws in America now. It's illegal to imminently incite violence. Well, the OIC, turns out they have a different definition of incitement. In America, incitement means the language you use has to expressly encourage the violent act. So if I say to you, go kill Joe tomorrow at 2 o'clock, and you all do that, you'll be guilty of murder and I'll be guilty of incitement. But the OIC is interpreting incitement totally differently. They use the Danish cartoons as their example. That's their example, not mine. They'll say, well, somebody drew a cartoon and those riots afterwards were incited. Well, that doesn't meet our definition. So what they did is, that's one clause, and there was another clause, I won't take up your time, but there were two clauses that didn't sound so bad, especially that one. But they always wind up finding a way to take a word that we think means one thing, and they interpret it another way, so they still have the same outcome of trying to criminalize, silence, or otherwise shut people up when they say anything bad about an idea, the idea of Islam. Hillary Clinton, I'll just tell you, I couldn't tell you what happened. By the time the resolution passed, from the time in March of 2011 until December of 2011, that she and the head of the OIC, and to a lesser extent, a representative from the EU, decided to get together and have implementation meetings, conferences, and that's a big problem. UN resolutions are not legally binding. They don't have, they have political clout. So if they're passed over and over again in various UN bodies, they have more political weight. At a certain point, they could be deemed customary international law. But for the most part, honestly, if we would have just left it as a UN resolution, it would not have been the end of the world. There was no reason for her to announce that the State Department was going to have a conference to implement that resolution. It was unprecedented. So she had this conference in 2011 in December with 30 countries attending to find the best practices. I couldn't tell you what happened between March and December that somehow her whole idea of preserving free expression completely went out the window, and they started doing practices to try to use the OIC's interpretation when they implement it. And, you know, in the US, they don't have the hate speech laws, but she said that the US advocates for other measures to achieve the same result and to use peer pressure and shaming. That was the phrase that she used, and forgive me, but I don't really think it's the State Department's job to use peer pressure and shaming to silence the speech of Americans with whom they disagree. So it's technically not a violation of the letter of the law, the First Amendment. In my view, it's a violation of the spirit of the law, but it's also a big problem for national security. It's a big problem for national security, and they have had a conference. She held the first one. The second one was held in London. Or was that the third one? Anyway, it's been once a year since then. They're still doing it. They're still doing it.